Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cardiff Central podcast, where there'll be as little mention of Saturday at the Millennium Stadium as is humanly possible. Instead, we'll try and focus on the Six Nations as a whole, hunting for any positives and assessing how Jockey got on in his short secondment at the Vale, clinging to under-20s positivity and Cardiff basically scoring all the tries and all the points at the Arms Park on Friday night. And then real rugby's back this weekend. Cardiff host the Lions. As we get into the season running, we'll be looking at that game, how big it is for the season as a whole, and what we're hoping for from the remainder of this season. Joining me on the pod this week, we've got Fraser. Fraser, how are you?
Yeah, not bad. As good as can be.
Making what we've decided is his full pod debut now. Steve Coombs, not with anything to sell this time.
Yeah, I'm not going to try selling anybody any comic books this time around, but good to be here. How are you guys?
Yeah, good to have you. And fresh from media appearances on Espador X Heno, BBC Radio Cymru, BBC Radio Wales. It's media lovey. Andrew Ford, how are you, man?
I'm very good, thank you.
Good stuff. Right. As I said, we're not going to do anything about the game itself. If you want coverage of that, I think pretty much every other rugby podcast is picking the bones of Saturday's defeat of Wales suffered at the hands of England. You can listen to the wrap. I think they desperately tried to cover it in some sort of way that didn't make you want to turn the podcast off during the middle of it. But instead, we'll sort of look at the campaign as a whole. Fraser, coming to you first. Is there any positives for Wales from the Six Nations?
I mean, Falatau didn't get injured, so I guess that's a positive for Cardiff. He's gonna, he's got some form. He played pretty well. I don't know. I think the only positive I was thinking about was obviously the Ireland game is the sole game that had any kind of like bit of the Scotland match, but that was the one that kind of gave us all a little bit of hope. I suppose the thing I came out of it is I think the quality of player is not the issue necessarily. I don't think we're lacking in quality. I think the players we've got, you can change around teams and stuff, but I think that is there. But I think fundamentally, yeah, there are wider issues about, restarting the whole coaching process and everything, which will take a while. So, I mean, yeah, I don't have a huge amount. Jack Morgan was great. Ben Thomas did pretty well as well, I think, coming back from an absolutely devastating performance at 10 to brush that off and play pretty well in the games he played. I was pretty impressed by that. I think last week I said, barring an absolute disaster, it's been a positive spell for Jockey. And it's like the one thing that could have meant this all shit happened. So yeah, not overly positive, but I think they're the only things I've kind of tried to cheer myself up with.
Fordy, is that fair? Like, is there the players there, do we think, to turn this around?
Yeah, I think to an extent, the players, if you look at the kind of the age profile of the players, they've still got a high ceiling to kind of reach that your likes of your Jack Morgans, your Dav Jenkins, plenty more. There's still quite a few years until they completely kick on. So in terms of quality, like I still think you players like Jack Morgan, I've written as my positives Blair Murray and Jack Morgan, and I think Blair Murray's 23. Might be wrong on that by a year or so. So like if they kick on in terms of quality, then I wouldn't worry too much about that. But yeah, I think there is definitely something lacking with regards to. I felt like the game on Saturday. Don't want to reflect on it too much. It was just almost relentless at times the way England approached Wales. That there was almost nothing the Welsh defence could do, and likewise in attack, it was so static at times.
Steve, obviously, Jockey didn't have very long. 3 games. I totaled it probably 9 training sessions with the full squad throughout his sort of month there. Is it from a sort of rugby perspective? Is it sort of a positive thing that he's got to tune out of them for at least a bit of games, or is he just sort of enjoyed the experience and come back now with a sort of a different perspective on rugby?
I mean, there was a little bit of a period probably after the Ireland game, where you're suddenly thinking, hang on, is he going to be taken over permanently? And obviously, from a Cardiff perspective, that's a little bit, that would have been a bit bittersweet, because I think we're really desperate to hold on to him. I think he's a resilient character. We know he's a resilient character because he's already had to be at Cardiff. And I'm sure he'll bounce back. And he's the sort of character who's going to go in and want to just hit the ground running back at Cardiff, I think. I watched the press conference after the game on YouTube, and I thought he handled that really, really well. And he gave one answer that I thought was really interesting, because he was asked about England's power game and how they seem to run over Wales. And his answer was, well, yeah, but I'm not going to use that as an excuse. And I really like that answer, because I think a lot of coaches would say, oh, yes, we've got to go back to the regions and work on conditioning, or we've got to find these big power athletes to compete with these teams. But he stuck to his principles there and said, well, no, we've got to find ways of playing with the players we've got. And that means ball movement. That means playing with pace. So I found that a real positive. I think he's someone who's going to stick to the way he likes the game being played and isn't going to move away from them.
Yeah, I also thought, like, on his press conference stuff, obviously the rugby side you can assess for the results and the performances, but I just think the way he's handled himself as a person has been pretty impeccable over the last month. And in the press conference last week, he spoke about sort of what it's meant to his family and his kids coming along to the games and stuff. And there was quite a lot of dust in the room that I was where I was watching him for certain. There was he got a little bit emotional there, which was quite nice to see after sort of the stone-faced nonsense of Gatland for the last 18 months.
I think it's also quite striking that I haven't noticed any real criticism of him after the game. I mean, I was kind of expecting social media to be a bit of a bin fire and the coaches being targeted. I haven't really seen that, so he's gone down well with the Welsh public generally, I think.
Absolutely. The one sort of question I had looking forward, obviously, what happens next is in the hands of the WRU. It could be anything really coming out of Westgate Street over the next sort of month or two. There's the list that's come out about the director of rugby, which looks less said about that the better. We're not sure then how long the process is going to take to appoint a head coach, but let's like put all our eggs in the basket of saying the WRU finally get some people in these positions and have a head coach come the summer, where they're doing a 2-test tour of Japan while the Lions were on. Fraser, if you were coming in as the head coach, would you sort of take that as an opportunity to get a win against a team, an Eddie Jones side, which hasn't particularly lit the world alight since he's returned to the Far East? Or would you sort of say, right, it's Project 2027 now, we're building for 2 years, I'm going full development, and that's what we're aiming for?
I mean, personally, I think you have to go in to get the win. I think 17 games in a row losing, and we have players in the team who play for Wales who haven't won a game. That is demoralizing. I know you can kind of say, forget about it, focus on development, focus on building a style of play and that kind of stuff. But ultimately, I think to win a match would be massive for the players and really important for the fans as well. I think fans are going to get more and more disenchanted if they see a summer where, we look a little bit better, but we lose to Japan. I don't think people are going to look at that and accept it. I think there'll just be more negativity. And then that would go into the autumn. And then you're looking at people not wanting to go see Wales because they've just lost 2 tests against Japan or whatever, but we sure it's green shoots. I think whoever the new coach is, or if it's still an interim, is just getting the monkey off the back and getting a win. Even if Japan aren't doing as well at the moment, that's a good chance to kind of get off the mark and build a bit of positivity in the team. So I would focus on that. Obviously, there's room to bring in some young players to come along for sure. It's not like that's the door's open for youth to go in and get chances. But I think the first test especially would be going focused on getting the victory.
Yeah, well, certainly not going to be too hamstrung by too many Lions selections anyway this summer. Who would you, if you're a young player who's not in the squad at the moment, which of those players would you be thinking is eyeing up a trip to Japan this summer?
I think, like, even looking at the Six Nations squad, you had someone like Eddie James, who he only started against Italy, might have been on the bench for one of the games, but like, you'd hope that someone like him would have a run of games. I feel like the connections as well is something that would be important on this tour. So, like, if you had a centre partnership of Eddie James and Joe Roberts again, Joe Roberts played quite a lot, featured quite a lot during the Six Nations. But again, I think you'd look at players like, for example, someone like a James Fender, maybe a Morgan Morse as well, to get them minutes under the belt, to kind of exposed to that international environment where it's not quite a, a South Africa at home or the All Blacks at home. It's giving them that chance against Japan, not quite in front of 74k people.
And obviously, we'll do our now sort of regular podcast ahead of the summer tour where we just sort of ask, is Teddy finally going to start a game when that time comes? Steve, moving on from the seniors to the 20s on Friday night, the positive of the last few weeks has been Richard Whiffin's side. They beat England 23-13 at a very busy and atmospheric Arms Park. They finished third, their best tournament finish in the under-26 nations since 2017. Is it as positive as it seems, or are the sort of battling nature of the wins maybe not as sustainable as they seem on paper?
No, I think it's a big positive. I mean, it's a bit of a shame that things went a little bit too lally against Scotland, because they could. I think they are better than that Scotland team, and they could now be sitting with the Triple Crown. But I think I was thinking earlier that there's been a little bit of a reversal where we used to say that the national side was covering up problems in the rest of Welsh rugby. I think it's slightly gone the other way around, where I think there are actually a lot of good things happening in Welsh rugby, and the under-20s is part of that. But it's now being made to look worse than it actually is, because the national side has not gone well. But looking at the under-20s, I think in a way, possibly the Junior World Cup in the summer is bigger than the Japan tour, because I think a really good showing in that could give the whole game in Wales a real shot in the arm that it wouldn't get from the Japan tour, because the Japan tour is kind of lose-lose, because if you lose, well, obviously you've lost, but even if you win there, people are just going to say, well, it's Japan, you should win those games. But I think that under-20s group is capable of really doing something in the summer, because I think traditionally they tend to be stronger in the summer than in the Six Nations. And, I'd even suggest adding Morgan Morse to that group to really go for it. Massive positive, that under-20s result. And there are some really, really good, talented players in that group.
Still bizarre that Morgan Morse is still eligible for the under-20s.
Yeah.
I'm sure he made his debut for them about a decade ago, I think. It's about 50 caps for the 20s now. Fraser, from a Cardiff perspective for the 20s, obviously Tom Cottle didn't play on Friday, as he was one of the ones caught up in that shenanigans in Scotland and was suspended. But there was a lot of positive for that sort of midfield quartet on Friday. Sean Davis got a start at 9. Harry Wilde probably played the best game I've ever seen him play so far in his career, anyway, at 10. And then Stefan Manuel at 12. With a lot of former Cardiff Pathway guys in and around the pack as well. If maybe we can put one or two of them back, it's quite good for us going forwards.
Yeah, it does look positive. I think, like you said, Harry Wilde had a brilliant game. That pass he made for the try on the wing, I've forgotten the winger's name, was brilliant. And then the conversion as well to just like straight down the middle. But he had a really great game. Yeah, Stefan Manuel, we can know what he can kind of do. And the wheels he had, the gas to get that try. I thought he was brilliant. And I think clearly Cardiff the region produces a lot of talented players. Some of them get poached by English teams or moved around, but it's clearly there's something going right in the Cardiff Academy, and it's resulted in, as you said, Stephen, really I came out of that match and I felt so positive about the future. And I think I was thinking about the physicality thing, because obviously England were much bigger than Wales, but it didn't show as much. The tackles that the Welsh under-20s were putting in were mad. It's like we're talking in the chat, like his shoulders felt pretty sore just watching it, because they were just like properly chopping into those tackles and like hitting the English team back despite the size difference. And it's like, it's not that huge players doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna, you know, make yardage, or you're gonna, or the smaller players are gonna get steamrolled. So there's more to it than that. So yeah, I was pretty happy with that, and yeah, Cardiff definitely have some stars in the making, I think. So yeah, good stuff.
One of those, Andrew, is Stefan Manuel, as I mentioned. I think he played every minute of. Well, he might have come off right at the end against England. He gets substituted in the last minute to just deny him playing every minute of every game at 12 for the 20s. As is sort of customary with Welsh rugby, once we see somebody who looks half decent, we immediately have to big them up for the next level. But obviously he has played for Cardiff first team against Leon just before Christmas and looked pretty good. He's played quite a bit for the Super Rugby Cymru team, the Rags, and probably already looks too good for them as well. How far off is he making a Cardiff 23 on merit and not just on rotation or injury?
Yeah, I was looking through the fixtures for the end of the season. I think really depends on the results in the kind of run in now. But like, we should really kind of target, I think, at least giving him a start in one of those games in South Africa. As kind of tends to happen when we're in South Africa, there's always a little bit of a rotation each game. But yeah, I think he's very much on merit, deserves a kind of spot. The thing that will definitely count against him is we tend to go for a 6-2 split these days, so it's unlikely that he'll feature from the bench. But it'll be really interesting to see over these next couple of games whether he'll have a go at any point, with Ben Thomas having played all 5 games in the Six Nations, kind of see if he can fit in. But then likewise, obviously, Steph's played for the under-20s throughout the Six Nations, so it's kind of a case of how fresh he is. But we threw him kind of in the deep end against Leon just before Christmas, and as you said, he performed quite well. So I really got like there's a lot to look forward to with him. But yeah, it's maybe a case of not giving him too much all at once, kind of easing him in as we get into this run in now.
Good stuff, right? Unless anybody's got any burning stuff to add to Welsh chat, we'll slide on into the second part of the pod. Just before we do, if you are enjoying what you're listening to, feel free to drop us a like and a subscribe on whatever podcast platform you are listening to us to, or if you're watching us on YouTube, like the video and subscribe to the Rap channel. Loads of podcasts going up. Obviously, Dragons, Scarlets and Ospreys all back in action this weekend. The Women's Rugby Pod is now back up and running, with the Women's Six Nations starting on the weekend. And there'll be the Rap every week, and URC Rewind presumably coming back to look at the league as a whole. Not much in the way of news. We are sort of half anticipating something being announced this evening as we're recording, but we haven't quite got a hold of that yet. So if that comes in whilst we're on the pod, we'll mention that. But the only thing was the last week that season tickets have come out for next season, a small increase for adults and frozen for juniors. And this season ticket is still a thing after it expired. The digital ticket, they have sent new ones out now. So you can still go to games if you so wish. There's been some academy signings. Lloyd Lucas, fly half, who played for the Rags a few times during the SRC Cup, and Joseph Jones, winger from Glantaf, who I don't think actually featured in the under-18s this season. I assume was injured or something. But they've both signed senior academy deals from next season, which is good news. 2 very talented players. And Stevie has to mention that the JSG, the Joint Supporters Group, are pushing the WRU to meet with them. They haven't met since last June, which seems less than ideal, it's fair to say.
Yeah, it's quite a long time, and it's good that the WRU give that access to the JSG to ask questions and maintain communication, but obviously less good when meetings keep being postponed, and there is a lot to discuss at the moment. A lot of criticism of RBT in the past couple of days, not fronting up in front of the media and leaving Matt Sherratt to field questions about the state of the Welsh game. Meeting with the JSG might be one way of healing that problem. I think the leadership of the WRU in general need to start being more communicative with the public and explain what they plan on doing in the future. We still don't really know what the strategy is for Welsh rugby going forward. We've been promised a new PRA, a new professional rugby agreement, which I think every week we're told that it's about to be signed, but it never quite happened. So yeah, there's a lot to discuss, and I know JSG would, welcome that.
Absolutely. So hopefully the WRU returns some emails soon. Right. Getting into real rugby is back this weekend as Cardiff were into life once more with the URC kicking back off. We're on Friday night against the Lions at the Arms Park, 7:35 kickoff. If you can't make it to the ground, it'll be live on Scrum 5 and as usual on Premier Sports. The Lions, a team who we haven't beaten yet, played 3 and lost 3, 2 away, 1 home. The last loss coming towards the back end of last season, 34-13 in South Africa. Domachowski try and Tina Stabia's boot. It's incredibly tight in the URC at the moment. Cardiff are currently 6th on 31 points. The Lions are 8th on 29. But around us, you've got Munster in 5th on 33 points. And then you can go down to Zebra in 15th on 25 points. So 8 points separating 5th and 15th. Fraser, looking at the sort of fixture block as a whole, as we now enter the sort of season run-in, Cardiff obviously start with this game against the Lions. They then play Benetton away, Connacht away in the Challenge Cup round of 16. The weekend after, there will then hopefully be a quarter-final. Then there's the Ospreys at Judgment Day, Munster at home, possibly then a semi-final before going to South Africa to play the Bulls and the Stormers. What is the sort of minimum that you would take if somebody offered it to you now for this season run in, either in terms of league position, cup run, or just sort of general wins / performance for the end of the season?
It's tricky. I mean, I want to try and think positively and like have high expectations for Cardiff. And I was looking at the fixture list and I've kind of think, getting through to the quarterfinals in the European Challenge Cup would be great. So getting past Connacht, like beating them, would be nice. We'll probably play Connacht in the quarterfinals anyway somehow. It'll be some sort of mad alternate parallel universe. But yeah, so probably I was thinking getting through to quarterfinals and then probably winning against Lions, Benetton and Ospreys, I think would be 3 results that I feel we should be able to beat those teams. And if we're not beating them, then there's like raising some concerns, I guess, as to how much we progress this season, I suppose. Obviously, Munster at home would be a good result as well, but you're kind of writing off somewhat the South Africa away games because of how odd it is to go over there. So yeah, my perspective, probably like 4 wins, really, getting into quarterfinals, see how that goes. I mean, it depends who we're playing, but yeah, I could see how the quarterfinals goes, but if we don't progress further, that's fair enough. But I'd like to see us get past Connacht and solidify us in the playoffs. I know, as you mentioned, it's so tight that it's kind of hard so competitive. But if we can be there or thereabouts, like if we don't get to playoffs, where we're like on the same points as other people, let's just get those wins. I think those 4, I'd be happy enough about that if someone told me that and offered that to me now.
Broadly similar question, and also sort of how much does this end of season run-in matter? Has it been a successful season already for Cardiff in terms of comparing to last season and showing progression going forward?
Yeah, definitely been better than last season with just some of the results we've got. I think, I kind of bite your hand off at the idea of us being in the playoffs at the end of the season. But then a part of me is also like, if we somehow progress quite well in Europe, I'd understand if they maybe took their foot off the gas in the league, especially if there was if we were like sitting in 9th, I'd kind of maybe understand that they'd focus on and prioritize on Europe as opposed to the league. But yeah, I agree with Fraser in terms of, I think those games are ones we should target, but I also really think the Munster, good a side as Munster are, I think considering it's a home game, really need to target that win. Obviously, it's not completely likely, but yeah, I think we can reflect on the season at the end of the season, even if we don't make the playoffs, if we nail those wins against Munster, Lions and Ospreys at Judgment Day, and we can reflect on it and be like, okay, we did what we could. We didn't kind of completely bottle it as such.
I think an important point to add, of course, is that if we do beat Ospreys at Judgment Day, I think that secures the Welsh hubcap for us, which would make us the first two-time winners of that trophy, and obviously that can go up in the trophy room in the clubhouse. Steve, similar question in terms of what the end of the season, what we're looking for, and what sort of areas of performance are we looking at Cardiff to either develop, I suppose, if we don't have it already, or improve from what we've seen so far this season to achieve something in this running?
Consistency. Consistency would be good. I say that. I mean, I've been watching Cardiff for a couple of decades at this point, and I don't think the club has ever been consistent at any point. It's pretty much written into the club constitution. But thinking back to the Leinster game, although we lost that, I found it quite a satisfying watch because I thought our attacking structure looked much, much better. We were attacking, moving the ball much better than we had been, certainly around Christmas, where we, particularly against the Ospreys, and there were reasons for that, but our attacking game, which really is our USP, was sort of stuttering a bit. We didn't look as good as you'd hope that we would. If we can maintain that into the Lions game, and then into Connacht and Benetton and Munster, I think we'll be there or thereabouts at the end of the season if we can keep that up, keep that kind of attacking shape and threat going. And also it'll make for exciting rugby to watch at the Arms Park, won't it? So.
Absolutely. Fraser, then focusing on the game this Friday in particular, obviously we've all said it's a game we'd like to target. Is it the biggest game of the season so far in terms of if we didn't win it, sort of how quickly could things unravel then towards the end of the season?
Ooh, that's horrible to think about, to be honest. I know it is a massive game, and I think Lions, I mean, their away form is pretty poor. I think they've beaten Dragons and Zebra. They're the only teams they've beaten away this season. So I think it is there for the taking. I think we should beat them. I would be very disappointed if we didn't, because I would say we would be going in as favourites based on our kind of form and how we can play, the potential that we have. In terms of the knock-on effect, if we didn't win, I guess it depends on how that happens. But yeah, any loss would be pretty deflating, I think. And then going to Benetton, who I'd be not confident about, but I'd hold a chance of us beating, depending on how many of their SC squad come back. But I think we still got a chance there. But it would be tougher to have kind of blown this chance. I think it's a good chance to kind of really solidify our position in the table and show that we are, we've got those ambitions to get in the playoffs and we've got the quality to do that. So yeah, I'm trying not to think about the possibility of losing. I'm just positivity focused on the win. So we'll see.
I like that manifestation. Andrew, in between your various media appearances, I set you some homework. If you obviously, if you're listening, you don't know, Andrew has a very successful YouTube channel. They're very much rugby's. I don't know, Logan Paul. He's quite big on YouTube, isn't he? Logan Paul. If you were, and I asked if you were making a sort of player compilation / highlight reel for one of the Lions players, or a couple, which ones would you be picking? Who are the ones to look out for on Friday night?
Yeah, I wrote a few names down. Again, I'm not sure who's completely fit at the moment, so don't blame me if these players don't play. But it might be a positive because I'm highlighting them as good players. But yeah, I'd go for Quan Horn, who's their fullback. Reminds me a little bit of Hugo Keenan in the way that he plays. That I always find with Hugo Keenan, he doesn't look like he should be good at rugby. And it's very much that with Quan Horn, that he kind of always seems to beat the first man, bit of a playmaker and solid in defence. Other player I've gone for is Edward van der Merwe. Made his debut for the Springboks in the summer against Wales, very much a winger in the same mould as Cheslin Colby, Kirtley Aronson, and Gio Aplon. And then the other one I've gone for is Rowan Venter, who is just one of these back rowers that kind of like Hamish Watson. It just seems he can't be stopped. There's no matter what you do, he sends defenders flying. So yeah, definitely he's a player to look out for in terms of physicality if he does play Friday night.
Because Stefan, obviously, if they don't play,
Sorry,
then
could I just jump in there?
go on.
The other Lions player who's worth keeping an eye on is Frankie Horn, the number 8. Who's whenever I've seen him, I've thought, oh, he'd be pretty useful at Cardiff. Actually, he'd be exactly what we need for a number 8. Unfortunately, I think he signed a new contract there. But with the Lions generally, I don't necessarily always make best use of my Premier Sports subscription. But if I'm at home and I can see the Lions are playing, I'll put that game on because they are always an enjoyable team to watch.
Well, on that point then, where, Steve, can we get at them on Friday? Where is there somewhere where we can obviously sort of do a job on them? Because obviously they've as I mentioned before, we played them 3 times, they've beaten us 3 times, so they obviously got a little bit of a hold on us.
Where do we get at them? I mean, I suspect the answer is to not worry too much about them and just worry about us. I mean, I think we should look at the end of the season, not in terms of what's the minimum we can do. We should be confident because we got a good team, we got good players, and maybe there'll be a couple of internationals stood down for this game, but we got a good enough team to beat them just by playing our own game. So I don't think it's a case of, or they've got a weakness there that we can sort of get where we can get at them. Cardiff are good enough to beat them. And I think it's going to be an exciting game for everybody who goes because, like I say, the Lions are a fun team to watch, but so are Cardiff. And if we play our own game against them, I'm pretty confident we'll get a win.
That is an excellent point, actually, in terms of we do sort of think too much about other teams and not just sort of back ourselves in game as well. It feels like it sort of often looks like we suffer crisis of confidence during 80 minutes as games go on. I did mention off air pre-pod the weather looks quite nice on Friday. I've just had a check again. It's raining, so I don't. No one seems to know at all. BBC weather changing by the hour or what the weather's going to be, but I'm sure that on our surface the 2 teams will serve up a pretty good showing. Getting into our team selection, as Steve mentioned, there'd be a couple of players unavailable. It's a bit tricky because we haven't had an injury update for a while, and unfortunately Cardiff haven't done one of their little Instagram videos where I can spy on who's there and who isn't this week. But definitely injured on the long-term list. Obviously, Theo Cabango and Ewan Stevens remain sidelined. And then from a video they put out last week during the international window, there was still no sign of Ed Byrne and Mason Grady, which is a bit of a concern there, as they were both meant to be back sort of early March time. So I think we're going to our team selection might be all over the shop this week because we don't really know who is and isn't available. But I'm going to rule Byrne and Grady out. I'm also going to rule Reece Barrett, Aled Davis, Jacob Beetham, and Josh Adams out, who have all sort of either picked up knocks over the last few weeks or are yet to reappear for ones that were picked up a bit longer ago. And then of the 8 players in the Wales squad from Cardiff, obviously Adams is one of those, picked up his hamstring injury, so we assume he's injured. I think then the likelihood is that Talupe Faletau and Ben Thomas definitely won't be available, having played a lot of minutes in particularly the final 3 rounds of the Six Nations. I think Kieran Azarati and Teddy Williams are probably unlikely, having both played in the last 2 games as well, albeit coming off the bench. But you would think that James Botham, Evan Lloyd, and Ellis Bevan are probably likely to be available. Bevan, having not had any minutes at all in the Six Nations, unfortunately, and Botham and Lloyd not appearing in any of the last 3 games. Obviously, it's not just about playing time. There's sort of mental fatigue of being in a test camp and training at that level every week and being away from home. But I think think those 3 players are 3 who are likely to want to come back and play immediately, having not played for a little while. And then for the under-20s, I noticed on Instagram that Tom Bowen is in Dubai, which probably rules him out of playing on Friday night. And I think I suspect Stefan Manuel, the other player who you might put in consideration for Friday potentially, would also be given a bit of time off, having played so regularly for the under-20s as well. So going through the 15, flip over. I've sort of penciled in a few names who are more than likely to start. Jump in if you want to disagree, but I've got Domachowski, Belcher, and Littrick as your starting front row. And then I've got Josh McNally permanent markered into the second row. Then Fraser, come to you on McNally's second row partner with Teddy likely unavailable. I've got Roy Thornton, Seb Davis, and potentially Ben Donald in the running for that. Who would you like to see there?
That's tricky. I think Rory Thornton had a great game against Leinster. I thought he was pretty impressive. But then so did Seb Davis off the bench. I'm gonna give Rory Thornton the nod because he impressed me. Kind of show, I think I judged him harshly or thought he was more limited than he is as a player. So for that reason, I'm gonna give him my selection.
If anyone wants to jump in and vehemently disagree, I will then rule like the judge. But I think there's also an element to consider with the second row that we might see over the next few weeks. Obviously, it's not confirmed yet, but highly likely that Seb Davis is off to the Dragons this summer, and whether that might factor into any team selections, players leaving, maybe not playing as many minutes as they might have done were they staying for next season. 40 back row then is, I mean, it's all of a sudden absolutely stacked again. Trying to pick the three in the back row. You've got on the blind side, Alex Mann, Ben Donald, James Botham. Botham joins Dan Thomas and Thomas Young on the open side options as well. And you could slot him into 8 with Alan Lawrence and Mac Martin there as well. Who would you be favouring as your trio there?
I think you've got to give Alan Lawrence another go at 8. I think he's been consistently great getting over the game line all season. So I definitely have him penciled in as 8. And as is naturally the case with Cardiff, it's always a bit of a lottery in particularly open side flanker. But I'd like to go for Thomas Young as kind of the fetcher. I think turnover ball will be crucial Friday night. And it'd be nice to kind of give James Botham a run out, especially with his kind of physicality at 6. But I'd be indifferent again. I'd be in between James Botham and Alex Mann. Obviously, I like Alex Mann's aggression as well, and it'd be kind of nice. He loves a bit of shithousery, so it'd be kind of nice to watch a bit of that Friday night, him getting in the faces of the South Africans.
Any strong feelings elsewhere on that 6 jersey?
Yeah, I think I'd go for Alex Mann at 6. I think Alan Lawrence and Thomas Young are set in stone as the 8 and the 7. I'd probably go for Alex Mann partially because I think he's started to come back into form in the last couple of games because he had that time off and it seems to have taken him a little bit of time to get back up to the level he was at last season. But I think we've seen signs of that, so I think he warrants a start, and then Jim Botham is a pretty good guy to have coming off the bench.
I'd also add that such as Mann's sort of shithousery and aggression, bring him off the bench.
You can't underestimate the power of shithousery.
You can't, but I also like bring him off the bench is borderline a risk that he gets so wound up watching the first hour that he just comes on and does something like immensely stupid then in the final 20 minutes. Steve, sticking with you for 9 then. Probably not the trio we thought we would be debating at this point of the season about who starts at 9, but we've got Johan Mulder. Callum Brayley was on the training footage. I assume his short-term deal continues through this week. And then Ellis Bevan coming back in from the national team. Who would you like to see at scrum half?
I'm a bit of a Johan Mulder fan. I think he's really added something, and I think he's adapted to URC rugby now. And I think he should stay there. I think he's been very impressive. Also, he was with the Lions last season, and I think, generally speaking, if you've got the opportunity to play someone against the former team to prove a point, then you take that opportunity. So yeah, I thought Callum Brayley was pretty impressive in his cameo against Cardiff, but yeah, I think you go with Mulder and then Ellis Bevan on the bench.
The old Mulverhill rule of playing your players against their former teams.
It's a strong rule.
Backs then, I've pretty much, I think it sort of picks itself a little bit. There's not a huge amount of depth there at the moment between injury and unavailability. I think Sheedy will probably be the 10. Roy Jennings and Ray Lilo at centre. Ray Lilo similarly permanent market in, and will remain there for next season whether he likes it or not at this point. And then Cam Winnett at full back with Beetham still likely injured. Fraser, wingers then, you've got Gabe Hamer-Webb, Regan Grace and Harry Millard, 2 from those 3.
Probably go not Regan Grace. So Gabe Hamer-Webb and Harry Millard. I think I'd pick as the wingers. I still have high hopes for Regan Grace, but I think Gabe Hamer-Webb has had some really good games recently, and he's quite a good physical winger, and he's played well. And then Harry Millard's obviously got a brace against Leinster, and he knows his way to the try line, as they say, and yeah, I think he's a quality winger. So I think those 2, and then you got Regan Grace to come on. Well, if he's on the bench, if he's on the subs bench, but we'll see. If it depends on the split, but yeah.
That does very much depend on the split forward. You mentioned earlier that we're playing a lot of 6-2s at the moment. Would you remain a 6-2 for this Friday night?
I think, again, when it's a South African team, brings so much physicality that it's almost natural to have 6 forwards on the bench. And in terms of the back line, again, we're kind of lacking a bit of depth. It's a case of if you're comfortable with Rory Jennings possibly covering 10, kind of leaves no real necessity to have a Tina Stabir on the bench. But yeah, again, it's trying to work that out, and it means that you can have, if you have like both of them on the bench, it means you can chuck a Ben Donnell on the bench as well to cover both second row and back row, and then both of them can cover pretty much the whole of the back row. And so I think from that perspective, I'd very much go Ellis Bevan and Regan Grace as your bench options if we do a 6-2 split.
Stephen, backup hookers are interesting. When we got Evan Lloyd and Evan Daniel back to their sort of every other potentially for the rest of the season, is that how we see it behind Belcher, or would you like to see them, as difficult as it is to not have Belcher starting, do they need to step up and get a few more minutes at this stage of their careers?
Yeah, I think hooker is actually the trickiest position to call because obviously Liam Belcher is the captain. I really like Evan Daniel. I think he started to show a bit of what he's capable of, and against Leinster there was that one run where suddenly oh my God, suddenly we've got a hooker who's winning collisions and breaking tackles against Leinster, which is something we obviously need. And then Evan Lloyd will be gagging to get a game, I imagine. So that's tricky. I mean, that's a real coin cost decision. I wouldn't be unhappy if either of them were to play a part on Friday night. I'll go for Evan Daniel, I think.
That's fair. That carry was very good. He's immense power, but I think he just needs the consistency of game time to get it on the pitch.
And also, I mean, on the shithousery thing we mentioned with Alex Mann, there's certainly a definite shithouse vibe about Evan Daniel. I mean, particularly if you think back to what happened with Mapimpi,
yes,
and they're kind of laughing in his face. I mean, I quite like that. And actually, yeah, definitely Evan Daniel. That's exactly what we need against the South Africans. We need to up the shithousery quota. That's the way we win.
So we got Evan Daniel, and then it's a bit bare bones at prop as well, really, with Danny Southworth and Will Davis King. You only remain in fit senior props. We got Seb Davis then 19, and then what you mentioned Donald and Mann 20 and 21. Is there any call for like a Dan Thomas as a direct replacement at open side, or are we happy with Mann coming, or both of them switching to 7 if need be?
I think you're quite you're in a bit of a tricky situation when you have the issue with Thomas Young and Dan Thomas is you kind of either start one and then completely drop the other. They're kind of not similar players, but they're very much out and out 7. So it's kind of tricky to have one then on the bench. Obviously, with a 6-2 split, it makes it easier, but I'd very much kind of prioritize having Ben Donnell, who can cover second row on the bench, along with the second row option in Seb Davis, then have 2 back rowers on the bench.
I think I said Man, but obviously I meant both of them with Man starting, and then Bevan and Grace as the remainder of the bench. So our selection for Friday, which I mean, it could be miles off really if everybody's suddenly available. This whole exercise might have been totally pointless, but it is most weeks to be fair. But up front we've got Domachowski, Belcher, Litterick, McNally, Thornton, Mann, Young, and Lawrence, and then in the back line we've got Mulder, Sheedy, Jennings, Lilo, Millard, Hamer, Webb, and Winnett, with a 6-2 bench of Daniel Southworth, Will Davis-King, Seb Davis, Ben Donald, James Botham, Ellis Bevan, and Regan Grace. Any last bits on Friday night's game, Steve?
I think the only thing I'd say about the selection is I'm not sure it would surprise me too much if more of the Wales squad play a part than we think, because Matt Sherratt might say, well, you've got this monkey on your backs now. The best way to get rid of that is to go straight back out and show what you can do on the field. And someone like Teddy Williams, who I think seems to get better every time he plays, that might actually be the solution. So I'm not sure I'd be that shocked if, say, Teddy Williams or perhaps even Faletau end up playing. I don't know, but it wouldn't shock me if that's the route they go for.
I think the other aspect of that as well is that they could ask them to come straight back in this week and then give them next week off and not take them to Benetton before playing Connacht then the week after. If they see Lions home as more of a winnable game, perhaps, or one that we want to be targeting and get a bit of a crowd in before saying, listen, don't worry about Italy and come back fresh for Connacht the week after.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing is, I mean, as we said, this is probably pretty good, a pretty big game. This might just sort of strike the tone for the rest of the season. So with that in mind, maybe you do say, play this one and have a rest later. But yeah, we'll see.
Good stuff. As I said, that game's Friday night, 7:35. You can get down to the Arms Park. There's a bunch of offers on this week. I think season ticket holders can bring somebody for free, and there's a student offer as well, like £10, and you get a pint and a ticket or something. So hopefully there'll be a decent crowd there in spite of the sort of apathy around Welsh rugby at the moment. One piece of any other business this week, which is the live reveal of the signing, as I've just had it text through. Cardiff are going to announce Tame Basham as signed from the Dragons this evening. Not a massive surprise, actually, to anybody, because I think we all sort of knew that he was on the way. Frazier, I think we've spoken about it a bit before, but pretty happy with this signing?
Yeah, I think, obviously, I think I'd maybe rather tight head or, get some front row options. But yeah, I think he's I do like Tane Basham, and I get to say Basham Tane is the chant I use. But anyway, but yeah, I think he's a dynamic player. He's played fairly well for the Dragons this season. And yeah, I look for speaking of Shit Asri, he also brings a lot of that as well. So we're really filling our team with that, which is good, positive. And I guess with people potentially leaving in the summer, I think it's a good signing. And yeah, I think he's a good player, and I think there's more potential in him still. Because how old is he now? Is he 25?
25, I think. Yeah.
So he's still fairly young. He's got a couple more years of maturing and kind of getting better. And I think maybe he can bring some leadership as well. He seems like quite a good person in that sense, if he can kind of manage his discipline and stuff. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with it.
As Fraser mentioned, it's likely that there's sort of a swap almost with Thomas Young heading in the other direction. That'll be the sort of the comparison made. Is disappointing to lose a player like Young, but Basham coming in is pretty decent.
Yeah, definitely. I think we do get the better end of the deal there with the kind of age profile of both players. I'll be gutted to see Thomas Young leave, but yeah, I think Tane Basham's very much got a point to prove. Kind of been in the international wilderness for the last year or so, so he kind of the perfect signing to have. I think in that position. Likewise, I agree with Fraser. It'd be nice to get a tight head or a second row in.
Steve, do you think 7 will be his primary position, or is he sort of a genuine 6, 7, 8 option for us?
I'm not sure. I mean, he is a bit of a Navidi, isn't he? He can certainly play anywhere in the back row, and like Navidi, he punches above his weight as a ball carrier, which is certainly something we need. I saw him in Sainsbury's recently, actually, Tane Basham, and I was quite shocked by how small he is in person. because when he carries, he can he can do some damage. I think Saracens were interested in him, and I completely understand why Saracens were interested in him. Like Andrew says, be ashamed to see Thomas Young leave. In the perfect world, we'd keep both of them, but he's the younger man. I think he's going to fit in with our team very well. So, yeah, to go back to your question, I think he probably will play 7 for us. It's a direct replacement for Thomas Young. Could also play number 8. It seems to be maybe a bit more of a fashion in rugby to have a smaller, quicker number 8 at the moment. So I could see him playing there. But yeah, he's definitely a 7 for us, and I think he's going to prove to be a really good signing.
This stuff it will be interesting to see exactly what the makeup of the back row is at Cardiff next season, because if Faletau also leaves, then whether they bring another 8 in, whether they bring another 7 in and see Basham as more of an 8, or whether we just sort of go as with what we've got and stick with Lawrence and Martin back there, and both of them and Basham as more versatile guys, and Thomas, and maybe bringing Gwilym Bradley through a bit more as your open side then as well. There's plenty of interesting options for Darren Allinson and Jockey to consider. Any more for any more? Any other business anybody wants to raise?
I think the only thing would be Friday night. I'm sure this will happen anyway, but it'd be really good if we, as a fan base, as a support base, really show Jockey and players coming out of Wales camp a lot of support. Because I think they deserve it, and I think it would be good if we demonstrate to them how valued they are at Cardiff, which I'm sure will happen anyway. But you can't do too much of that at the moment, I think.
Absolutely, and a very nice positive note to end on. Thank you, Fraser. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Steve. The pod will be back next week. We'll be looking back on hopefully a Lions win, looking ahead to that trip to Benetton. The Rags also back up and running the following weekend, so we'll be having a look at their last few games of Super Rugby Cymru, and maybe slide in a little bit of Women's Six Nations chat if we can. Send us your questions if you've got any, but until next week, goodbye.